Welcome back, Kyle.
Thank you.
Glad to have you.
Nice to have you up front.
All right, it's 4 p.m. We'll go ahead and call the meeting of the Angola Investment Fund Board into session. We'll start with roll call. Sandy.
Here.
Mark.
Here.
Kyle.
Here.
Jerry.
Here.
Maria.
Here.
And Isaac.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum. We also have Rita and Kim in attendance. We will start with the approval of minutes. So in front of you should have the July minutes from our meeting. Be looking for discussion and or a motion.
Move to approve the minutes from the 29th of July.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as presented from the July meeting. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion is carried. All right, you can see the agenda that we have presented in front of you. Would anybody like to modify the agenda? All right, we'll move on. We'll start with old business and an update on the ordinance to city council that we discussed in the last meeting.
Yes. After discussions with Rita, who has also conferred with Kim,
Okay?
about some procedural procedures
Okay.
in terms of what we will do. We've come to an idea that I think Rita could probably explain a lot better.
So we talked about ensuring that you guys work through your red lines and your policies and procedures first. And then what we will do then is update the ordinance, amend it to make sure that it's matching what your policies and procedures are, and then submit those to council after that. So Jerry did at the last council meeting, he did bring up, hey, the AIF is working on some new things. He explained to the council, everybody seemed in agreement. There didn't seem to be any questions. He just talked about possibly changing up what you guys had talked about before. Everybody seemed fine about it. So I think instead of amending the ordinance now and taking it, it just makes sense to do your policies and procedures. And Kim was in agreement with that, I believe.
I'm in agreement with that, Rita.
Thank you.
It's kind of odd that ordinarily boards do their own policies and procedures. City council doesn't do that, but in this particular case, the enabling statute states that council shall adopt the policy and procedure. So that's what we're going to do. And I think Rita's suggesting get what you want ready, and then we'll take that to council.
Yeah, that makes sense because as you just mentioned there, that's a key component to it, that if they have to adopt it, then we need to have that prepared and ready to go. And I don't think we recognized that probably in our last conversation in here where we thought we could do the ordinance first or should do the ordinance first in the red line. So thank you very much. That makes sense.
I've got those codes here, Andy, if you want to read through. I just printed, but I don't think you need to now, but
Okay,
just for reference.
got it. All right, any further discussion on that from this group? All right, and we'll move on then to a review of the red line policies and procedures. Thank you, Isaac, for putting together the document for us. I did have Rita print off two different versions. One would be the clean copy, which sometimes it's easier to look at a clean copy and find out what it's going to look like to the end of it. And then also the red line version. So to start the conversation off, maybe Isaac, you can go through what you've done for us.
Yeah, so like I had suggested at the last AIF board meeting, I just figured I would take a stab at it, primarily because I've been one of the primary intakes for applications and questions as it relates to what is this funding, how can it be used or utilized? And based on our conversations, really we talked about three unique programs, but all under kind of the same mentality of what AIF is originally there for, which is a traditional revolving loan fund. We have the traditional loan program. That's what we've been operating as, and that's what many of our employers have been utilizing, the $100,000, 2% below prime note. We have a newly created idea, I think on the coattails of the wave of funding that we've gotten from other state sources, kind of this commercial / retail program. Could be identical to, at smaller amounts, but could be identical to the revolving loan fund, but now specifically for commercial or retail. And then this third program, which would be just adding really more teeth to what we already have done, which is the entrepreneurial program. That's the only one that's considered a loan / forgivable grant. Because of the way we set it up, it was really pilot monies that we were playing with. So for all intents and purposes, you could theoretically take the current balance of the AIF today and say, okay, this chunk is allocated towards this program, this chunk is this program, and this is what's left goes here, right? So this encompasses this first piece of Redline, just kind of creates those, if you will. All right. Really only creates one program because the traditional one was already there, just puts more specific details to it. And then the grant program is kind of still already there, at least conceptually. So we're just putting it out on paper. So that's really part one. As you get later on into it, I just tried to clean up some of the information as it relates to, again, the eligibility. But rather than write a bunch of sections and it just be a table of contents that is crazy, I think there's some duplication that could be had as it relates to when you're talking about the traditional loan program versus the retail and commercial loan program. One of the things we talked about is maybe the overall loan amount being different, a lot less. So then that would physically show up in kind of your term sheet of, well, maybe we're only granting funds up to $20,000, right? And we set criteria for that, or whatever that number may be. So in account or item 3, what I thought of doing was create, again, the eligibility and evaluation for each program inside 3, so that you could just go to 3 and say, okay, what's the eligibility? And they all be created. So that's why you don't see anything under AIF commercial and retail. I don't think we've talked a lot about that, what that would look like. And you sure don't see anything about in there about the loan or grant program from the entrepreneur standpoint. Again, because we need to provide more context to it. But structurally, I was trying to keep this form as close to whole as possible without rewriting the whole thing. Further on, you go down to explicitly saying the ETJ, or extraterritorial planning jurisdiction. I want to make sure that was referenced in there. Loan terms, I made mention about specifically item B, 4/B, where it talks about 20 new jobs. I don't think that's clear anymore. Most of our expansions over the last year or two in the city of Angola, yes, they've added new jobs, but it's been highly capital equipment intensive programs.
What does extraterritorial planning jurisdiction, what's that really mean?
Kim will probably correct me, but it's essentially a 2-mile radius outside of city limits. That's roughly correct.
It is. And what it is, the city has municipal powers within its corporate boundaries, of course. But we have certain municipal powers within 2 miles of our corporate boundaries. I'm not sure that the board can operate in that ETJ. Has someone double checked that?
I have not.
If not, I will. I think that's an easy answer.
Yeah.
So I'll double check.
We have permitting and zoning is really all we have in that extraterritorial jurisdiction. So yeah, that's a good question.
I don't believe you can loan to entities or people outside of the corporate boundaries. I will check and get back.
Okay.
That's a good distinction because your traditional loan for AIF, most of those corporations were inside city limits. You never had that problem.
Yeah.
But on the commercial or retail side, you could. So that's a really good point. I never think about that.
I know the money we give away here for the last fall or the fall before, we couldn't go outside city limits at all.
No.
Yeah, I believe that.
For the Okra loans, yeah.
Yeah, for sure, we could not.
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be the answer as well.
So that's fine. Clarity on that one, that's a good point. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Um,
I heard the term a lot, I just didn't know what it was.
It's basically a zoning thing. Cities can designate zoning districts to kind of give them a buffer from the surrounding county.
So areas where, like I did in 3, you would kind of separate each of the programs. I think you would logically do that in 4 as you set up the loan terms for each specific program. And in 5, as you set up the loan repayment, you would have specifics to each program. 6, 7, that's the last one. Those to me would remain roughly the same. You would want a similar reporting process, if not the same reporting process for all 3 programs. Regardless if it was a loan turned to forgivable loan, or if it's a true traditional $100,000 note, you'd want that same process, and your charge, the same would be applied. Assuming that $100 fee would go back to the city and its legal department to basically write up the document, so on and so forth. So I don't want to go too far, but I wanted to take what we talked about and at least start putting it in a document. So full transparency, it's not complete by any stretch of the imagination. But this was kind of how I was interpreting last month's conversation.
Looks great to me.
I agree, 6 and 7 needs to be the same. For all 3.
Well, it's only more work on this body if we create different criteria
Yeah.
for the program, right?
The only thing that you guys did mention last week was, or last meeting, did you feel like you need to define commercial /
Yes,
retail? Because I know we talked about some things
So
not.
the only place I describe what commercial retail to any definition is in 1B. Everywhere else, I leave it blank because I don't feel that we know what that is. 1B really just says commercial retail loan program is designed to help commercial retail establishments grow and expand their operations within the city of Angola and its ETJ. I really didn't go too much further on in that ETJ piece.
So I think I found the answer to the ETJ question. And Kim, you can correct me if I'm wrong. The governing board, which is you guys, of the fund may loan or grant money from the fund to a private or public entity if the government board finds that the loan or grant will be used by the borrower or grantee for at least one of the following: to promote significant employment opportunities for the residents of the unit establishing the local venture capital fund. So the residents of the city council. The second one is to attract a major new business enterprise to the unit, again, to the city council. And then to develop, retain, or expand a significant business enterprise in the unit. So to me, it's, and maybe I'm wrong,
That's clear. You cannot operate in the ET.
in the ETJ. So it has to be anything just governed by city council specifically.
Well, the corporate boundaries of Angola.
Yes.
We could clear up that pretty easy, but
Yeah.
I didn't feel like we discussed enough. I mean, I would want to lean on folks like Mark and others who were involved in that grant making process during COVID to glean some insight about what the issues were with commercial and retail. I think we already all agree the note would be smaller. I mean, at the end of the day, we've got $700,000 in total, so we don't have a lot of funds to divvy up between programs. But again, it's just not as clear as to defining who's eligible, other than, hey, if you're in the city of Angola limits, you're in
You're in
theory.
the business.
Yeah, you're in theory.
Well, I think home-based was something that
Yes.
we did not want to delve into.
So you could take a look at, we've cleaned up the eligibility piece pretty good by eliminating the NASIC code that were originally recommended in 13. You can take a look at the terms to kind of help you identify what type of commercial or retail organization you want to go after. I would stress you want to come back to, as an AIF board, to something similar to what the city of Angola would come back to, or what city council would come back to in terms of justifying its cause. making sure that whatever you're investing in theory, you are investing dollars. Whatever this board is providing recommendation to the city council in terms of investing, we want to make sure it's a sound decision. So the only program that would in theory go to entrepreneurial type of operations, meaning those that are not in existence yet, should be the entrepreneurial program. Because the other two are dependent on some sort of history. This is kind of getting into Mark's space, some sort of history of, are they bankable? Do we have things that we can claw back on and pull back in case they go south on their note? This body really doesn't have that authority, but that's the thinking that you want to have.
So is it a difference if, like, let's say I'm going to open my own franchise of Taco Bell. I don't know. I'm just throwing that there. I still technically, I'm opening this business, but it's a franchise of a big, not a box store, but a corporation. And I have to invest some of my own funds in the building or whatever, but I'm also opening a corporate versus an entrepreneurial local business. I don't know if I said that word correctly, but I mean, in my mind, it's like, do you define that? Does it matter? Because you want to.
I think we have the ability to define it. I'm not proposing you limit or just broadly allow anybody and everybody in. I just want to make sure that we understand, we create this program, what are the actual types of entities? Because at some point in the future, council or somebody from the community may question.
Yeah.
And
You want to give
my
those
dealings in
boundaries.
EDC working with councils, I don't want them out on a limb unless I'm out there with them.
Yeah.
So
When you say commercial/retail, are you talking zoning? Is that what you're thinking?
not necessarily, but you could tie it to zoning. I'm clearly talking about category or classification of business at that
Different
point.
businesses.
I like the
As in number of
I like you
employees or what.
eliminating home businesses. People do salons or different things in their homes. And I think if you're opening, but I don't know if you would want to tie it to zoning. You know, we've got downtown commercial, we've got commercial, a couple different commercial districts. I don't know that would work. I think defining commercial/retail, you know, is it restaurants? Is it I'm opening a tanning salon? Is it I'm opening a tattoo parlors? I mean, like, you can look at commercial so many different ways. So I don't know. It's up to you guys completely how broad you want to get, or, you know, if it's I'm opening up a local business that's not a corporate or a franchise, you know, I don't know. That's completely on you guys. But I think defining that not tied to a zoning is probably better.
I think we've got examples to look at. I mean, going no further than CDBG, who does lending and granting to retail and commercial outfits. Start there. I mean, the program, Mark, that you helped with during COVID and others, obviously, use some of that. I mean, the criteria was in it. I mean,
If you eliminate the housing side of things, and I'm in agreement with it, but if you do, are you gonna step on anyone that you wish you could help? Like maybe daycares? I'm just asking.
that's a good question, because some will argue that daycares are ran as a for-profit business. It's a tough for-profit business, but
Would it be helpful to define the things that we want those entities to produce in concert with the type of entity? Like some of the things that you were talking about, economic benefit. What's the type of economic benefit? Do they, if we're not doing home businesses, do they have, are they investing in a property? So, you know, where are those tax dollars, you know, going? Those kinds of things that are outputs to kind of round out and help define the things that we do want to include.
so that's part of the hidden benefit of the CDBG funding, because it attaches itself more or less to physical assets, particularly buildings and facades, right?
And that would be tough. I mean, because I feel like daycares need all the help they can get right now, and if somebody's willing to do that,
But this is a loan.
but this is a
Yeah,
loan. So
that's the
it's like, if you are, you know, if we if we do this for you and you open this in your home and we're helping you add a room on your home, but then you're only there 6 months and now you've got, I don't know. I
Mhm.
I think you almost have to disqualify them. I mean, as sad as it sounds, there's just too much risk.
do you just disqualify home business? Like if you've got a daycare that's possibly going in another building?
I mean, if they were gonna go to a public building where it's outside the home, it'd be different, it'd be a
Okay.
business, I would think. But like when I think of retail as well, I think maybe there's some other stipulations you can have in there, such as revenue based or, there's guarantees you can put on that
Yeah.
loan as well. I'm certain, but there's definitely some larger businesses in town that would probably not take a $25,000 loan, but they're larger and probably need 50 or 75 to do a
Which could
new
be the
project.
industry, but if it's like you said, a retail that, yeah.
Yeah, you still may have a gap. You might have a gap of particular industries that you're not going to hit. That's why I try not to isolate industries, which is why the recommendation was to strip it out.
Mhm.
Don't talk about the industries, but talk about the outcomes that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And that's how you write this. That way it avoids you from having those conversations.
Yeah, I agree.
Day one of saying, well, all these types of entities are excluded. Because it doesn't give you any leniency or leeway in case one of those actually does kind of qualify.
Seems like there's a balance between leaving it wide open enough that people fit into it versus too wide open where someone gets in there that you don't want. And then now we're saying no.
So
And they're saying, well, you're discriminating.
Yeah.
There's something against me in my business, but I will qualify based off your policies.
correct. Use the evaluation process as a tool to weed that out. Like, don't just tell somebody no because they don't qualify right off the bat. Let them come explain it to you. We're not obligated to say yes on any no.
Yeah.
We still have to go through our due diligence and through the findings of the financials and all. Those types of operations, you'll probably find something where it's like, if Mark's stomach doesn't feel right, I'm like, no. Because I trust his barometer.
Well, and I think being good stewards, like you talked about, not going out on a limb and being,
At the end of the day, you want the note to be paid back because you want the
Yeah.
interest to be paid back so that we compare these with additional deals with Mark and all his other friends' banks, through the community. I mean, you want the note to continue.
Now that
right?
people can use it later, yeah.
Exactly. You don't want to do a bad deal.
right.
So there's a lot more to it than I felt like I could actually go out and
Mhm.
grab and write.
This is going to take, just my opinion, I guess, but we've got work to do to get this fully defined, the commercial, right? It's going to take time to do that. I don't know what that time frame looks like. Are we at any risk in this group? Risk, I mean, like not being able to loan somebody money for the traditional program because we're waiting on this other more difficult program to fully define to occur. Now we're going to miss somebody over here in the traditional program.
I don't know what the active balance is today of that account, but last I knew it was like 6 something, right?
Yeah.
I think Ryan has that, yeah.
If we were under 200,000, I would say, I feel a little risky, but the businesses that I've worked with in the past, in the last few BREs, they have not been at a point where they've needed these funds. So maybe the best thing we could do is kind of at least identify what would we allocate in one of these programs so that we know what a cap is. So that in a future meeting, if I feel or we feel that we're approving loans that are reaching that cap in the traditional program only, we might need to speed up our process.
Mhm. But to your point, we don't have people beating down our doors to get
It's not
access
because
to
we're
these
not
funds right now.
asking. I had a side topic. I had an interesting conversation with a succession plan company potentially being bought out by another company. The funds right now don't work that way, but after the transition happens, the true traditional note could apply.
Mhm.
And most entities, when they do this transition, the two most critical things are capital investment up front and ongoing runway for 18 months, 18 to 24 months. So I would probably walk through the process and maybe still bring it to the board. But it's not defined that even those types of transactions
Mhm.
are eligible, right? I mean, eligible is probably not a good word, but is that something that the AIF would want to be brought? Succession happens all the time. It's not a bad thing for the company in most cases. So, but no, it's not
Could be
prohibited.
life-saving in certain situations and preserve those
Could take the
jobs in
company
that
to the
business
next
here.
level, yeah.
Yeah.
So there are things that, we'll continue to talk about, but I don't feel with the two individuals that I'm still trying to get them to come to this body, two companies, that's that max 200,000.
Right.
So
So the actual ordinance itself says that the expenditures of a borrower or grantee of money from the city investment fund account must be dedicated, committed, and used by the borrower or grantee for any of the following economic development purposes: research and development of technology, job training and education, acquisition of property interest within the city, infrastructure improvements, new buildings or structures located within the city, rehabilitation, renovation, or enlargement of buildings or structures located, machinery, equipment, and furnishings, funding small business development with respect to prototype products or processes, marketing studies, and to determine the feasibility of new products or processes, business plan developments and production. So I think, like, we've talked to some of the industries that we've been on, oh, you're talking about bringing a new line in, like, keep us in mind for some of that, but this is way broader than I thought it was.
So
I thought it was just specifically for,
those 7 or 8 items, every application that comes, that's in the ordinance.
right,
So
right.
it's like the Bible, you can't really touch that right now unless
Mhm.
the city gives you permission to. So in every note that we would bring, and even in creation of these programs, you would still, and it protects you, you would still try to tie it back to that stuff. Because
Yeah,
it's
I
more-
think that's,
other than employee training and maybe intellectual property, that stuff is more tangible stuff that you could see, somebody could physically see happening.
I was surprised job training and education was part of that. But I guess if you had a large industry and you needed training for 200 employees,
So the conversation recently had about the succession plan was the purchase of additional equipment and the training for that equipment. The split.
oh,
That-
that would go.
makes sense.
Yeah.
And right now, I've told them it can't happen during the transition, but the moment of ownership on, this becomes an avenue. So again, so I take those ordinance ideas or those ordinance items into consideration when crafting this. And that helps when you're talking about eligible or criteria, what the dollars would be spent on. It's already set in bed in the ordinance. You don't really have to touch it. Here, it's about who's eligible. How do you set up the loan terms?
Yeah, and historically, I don't know what the board has done, but I just think any investment in our community, whether it's training people, adding on to your business, creating a new line, getting new inventory, to me, any investment that you're willing to make in your community and here and stay here is important. So whatever that looks like makes
For
sense.
good candidates.
With good candidates, yes. That can actually pay back the loan.
So as the work, and thank you for the work, Isaac, that you've done, does the group have anything as far as that we want to pivot on? Or we feel like we're moving down the right pathway at least?
I think we're moving down the right pathway, using those outcomes as a general outline. And I think incorporating those as a reminder into the procedures, each one of those, to make sure that when we are talking about an applicant, that they are falling under some of those, making sure that that does happen. It's going to be critical in any decision-making, particularly if you're doing approvals or denials.
Right. Yes. And to your point, and I'm not sure how many on this group have actually gone through the process at this
I have.
point. Yeah, me too. Like, raise your hand, right?
Yeah.
But there, inside of that, there's also a scoring mechanism
Yes.
that we had in the past to do so that would list out the details, and you would score based off the details. So that exists as well,
Yeah.
which if this gets changed would need to also update potentially.
Yep.
Although it might not, because it might end up being exactly what's already in there.
You have a question, do all members turn in the numbers, or do we come to a consensus on the numbers?
So in the past, I mean, this is my opinion in the past, and you guys can talk about it too from your experience, but there's not been a really well-oiled process as it relates to that. So we would turn in a scoring sheet and then there would be a conversation and a vote of yes or no within it. But that would occur like you'd hand it in. And so there wouldn't be like a tallying up of a score or anything, or a passing score or anything of that nature. I don't know, but your experience, you guys have been involved with it.
No, Andy's right. I mean, it could probably be a little bit more formal, but I think it gave the opportunity past the scoring for each individual member to air their concerns, talk about them. In the presentation of the project, it is an executive session. We can't formally vote in the executive session, so we would come out of that. But in the process, we would deliberate and find out what is the pulse. And ask for a vote, we just say, what's the pulse? Is this something we want to do? Historically, we've actually been tabled some to give more time for due diligence. We did run the last one, Foods Alive. I think that was pretty straightforward with the building transition and equipment, so that was easy. The financials were not on that one, so. But I remember some that we did kind of sit on. We had a restructuring of a note of a prior company where they were down to a principal balance of like 60. They wanted to bring that back up to 100 because they were taking an opportunity to buy some equipment. We tabled that for a month, I think. So, there's a process in it, but to be fair, some of us haven't gone through it. So,
All right, so where do we move from here? How do we get to the next step where we have this fully defined? What's that look like?
I can add context to the loan grant program. I think we did a 1-page or a 2-pager on that. I would be fine with that. I'm looking at Retha, Maria, and Mark. You guys were heavily involved in the retail commercial loan program, right?
Maria was. I was just kind of a bystander.
Okay, well, maybe between you two, I would like some guidance. Mark, maybe you from your industry stake, things that you guys maybe look at when you're talking risk assessment. And then what you can recall from that process. I don't know that we don't have to recreate the wheel. I think we can borrow and steal from.
And from the CDBG, just look at what their definitions are.
I mean, there's a reason why they're doing what they're doing, whether it be state law or federal law, or just because it's how do you want to deploy these dollars within your community?
Yeah, because I think you want to keep it broad enough that it does help who needs help, but also narrow enough that you're being safe, but not discriminating as well, like keeping that.
Yeah, I don't want to see us just get into a situation where we're being accused of being discriminatory against something or against someone or whatever their product and service might end up being, where we open ourselves up for.
And keep in mind, we're a body of recommendation.
True. This is true.
Vote. The council has to vote. So in reality, you've got to make sure that you're protecting all 5 members of council.
So is that how so once you guys have scored and turned yours in, that goes to council to approve the loan?
It does.
Oh,
They have the ability to say no.
Okay.
So even when the application or the applicant comes in and we do give them kind of, hey, this went well, here's our next step. I share with them at that point. Don't get all excited. Don't go out and start spending your money yet. You got to wait for council to approve it.
Sure.
And theoretically, you should wait until you get the check in again.
Okay.
Which is generally another week or so after it's cut. So, but we recommend. So keep that in mind. Council's the one that's ultimately on the hook for this.
Sorry, Jared. Sorry, Gerald.
Gerald.
My concern a little bit is, and I mentioned this early on, is we're going through this whole process. My concern is 90 days or 120 days from today, we still have no applicants.
Right.
So how do we?
What are we going to do to get applicants is kind of what? Yeah.
I think that we can utilize some of our social media. I don't know if it's been utilized before, but the city has, our Main Street page, our city Facebook page, Instagram, whatever. I think that we can push it out on that. We can push it out on our newsletter a little bit.
I know
We
it's
could do an ad in the
newsletter, but
paper.
it's not really, it's just among other things, yeah.
Yeah, so we could do something in the paper, you know, as well, and maybe really spread the word. I know that we have a couple things happening downtown. And we had just like a new bar that went in. I haven't been in there yet, but you know, there's things, I know that there's other buildings right now being
Oh, yeah.
prepared to be remodeled, businesses opening. I think it was brought up to one of them, but at that time it was just industry. So I don't know, you know, that
Technically, it still is.
it still is. So yeah, until we
So,
And Rita,
decide.
you said we'd work on maybe get the handouts so we could take to the chamber.
Yes, we have to update the ones that we have. So I have to
Update
get those. Yeah. I want to make sure we get them updated
Before we,
with the correct information. So I want to either maybe wait until this is voted on. We have those and we've been handing them out to people
Okay.
at the industries, but until I don't want to say commercial. And
I understand, yeah, wait till we know what we do.
yeah, but we have been handing what we have.
I
out.
will start talking, I'll contact Julia.
actually, I've already started that conversation.
Oh, very good.
So in September,
I'll piggyback, no.
that's fine, that's fine. In September, I planned on putting information about the city of Angola's AIF in our newsletter, which goes out to over 500. It's primarily industries and interested folks. So it's not going to get a large part of your commercial space or retail space for that matter. But Julia has already said a couple times in our conversations internally that there'd be probably ways for us to get that information specific to that program into her membership roster through her newsletters and other means to get it out to that group. So I think those two avenues, we've utilized social media in the past for this program, but again, keep in mind, it's only for industry. So I'm
Yeah.
cutting out a large cross section of folks that could be
Maybe,
an applicant.
Uh-huh.
I think one of the things that occurred with the AIF Okra loans was that the idea of the testimonial, where people were like, okay, it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. I didn't jump through that many hoops of fire. So, you know, let me tell other people about it. And maybe that testimonial idea would be good for the industrial part too, as well.
Yeah.
And I don't know that people know any of that, right? So that's the word that's not getting out. It's like, well, who's getting these loans? Who's, you know, and I know that there's just, you know, potential privacy issue, which is something that we also dealt with. But again, they're getting public monies. So
I think it's gonna be our biggest issue. I mean, all this stuff I know we have to have in place. I get it, but we're going through a lot of work to do all this. I hope
If we're not.
we get a couple of people to the table.
like even people who finish the loans, right? Who are done and say, this is how it helped us and tell their story or blog or something.
So another group, I'm gonna pick on Mark because I like to. Another group is bankers like himself, right? Making sure that they're supplied with the information, they understand. There's an educational process because it can be utilized as another tool to mitigate risk.
Right.
Sometimes it makes their notes better because we're taking secondary position. So,
Well, it makes every one of them better because the cash flow is gonna be better because the interest rate's less, so at least on the $100,000 or whatever it is.
well, and prime's not like 2%.
True.
Not true. Or.
Not today, but that could
You said
change.
4 last time,
Yeah,
right? You
it's
said
4%.
what?
It's sitting here,
Yeah.
4%. The prime got pretty low.
But I think you guys are all hitting on the components of what have we done in the past? We've done newspapers, we've done some social media, we've done a little bit of word of mouth, like going out there and having conversations. But what is the real root cause of not having applications? And it might not be one, it might be multiple root causes creating the issue.
I can say being in the mud of it, I think it's been wholeheartedly number 3 as it was formerly written. It was very specific to NASIC codes that, let's be honest, not a lot of our industries solely fit in. It was just very hard to lend out at $1.8 to those types of entities when your cap's 100,000 and you were so descriptive. I know why at the time. makes a ton of sense. I'm not critiquing or criticizing that board at that time.
Right.
We ran it
We've
like we were gonna
changed.
have thousands of applications and we need, that's the way we ran it.
Yeah.
Well, I think in the past,
We
it was how do we become like a Warsaw? How do we have this specific industry and how do we get like these biotechnical jobs and these biotechnical industries to come here? That's what when talking to Kathy, that was the mindset at the time. That just has.
How do they apply? Is there an online application or is it?
The application checklist and the initial start's online. It's listed on my website as well, I think, as the cities. It's not, it was at one point.
Look, I don't, yeah.
But then from there, there's a whole host of documents that come through, which also include, right now, the automated process of an Experian credit check. That can be business, that can be personal, but that also comes through as attached to the business checklist.
And
Could
is
we
it a-
get copies of all those documents?
You,
Like
As a newer
applications.
board member, I don't.
Yeah, I
have
haven't
that
seen them.
information.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
For that,
When an
yeah.
applicant comes through, then yes, too. Actually, that's what I thought you were asking for. When an applicant comes through and submits, you'll get the application and all the supporting documentation, including the credit report for this body.
And just almost as a side note, you're asking for something that like as an onboarding to a new board member, like that's the stuff that you should be getting.
Like a
Like you should get a packet and a binder full of these, here are up-to-date documents and policies and all that. So
Yeah.
apologize.
Kyle's in the
It's
same
not-
boat.
Co-chair.
Co-chair problems.
Anyway, but to your point, okay, so once we define what we're wanting, then going back and looking at how do we get the word out to those groups of individuals? Because I'm sure that they'll live and look at different places as well. We just have not been hitting the mark on where they're looking for information, where their
Yeah.
attention's at, as well as the market conditions with this particular group was probably not.
Well, your numbers alone, I mean, there's 125 industries that meet these classifications across the county. 125 only.
Mhm.
So you add commercial retail in there, your number goes way up.
Right. And when those interest rates were low,
That made a big
what-
difference too.
what do we offer? We offer them maybe a clunkier system. Like how's the application process? Is it a fillable PDF or do I have to print the darn thing off, fill it out, talk to 14 different people, wait 6 months? So there are things that we need to do, I think, internally to make it easier for them.
Isaac, what's that? I can't think of the organization that will come to the EDC to talk to people about business plans and
SBDC.
yeah.
Business development.
I mean, I think some of that is spreading the word to some of those organizations where if I'm thinking, hey, I want to open this new business, I think I want to do this. The realtors in town that are talking to people about some of these locations. I mean, I think that we can get that information. And if we redo those flyers, Jerry, to make it easy to read and look
Yeah,
and to get to some of those people,
that's a good idea. Good idea.
I don't know why we couldn't.
At least
You know,
drop
like,
off at
hey, if
their
you're
office.
talking to somebody that, yeah, they're looking for
Yeah.
a building in town or they're hoping, you know,
So to your point, having Isaac be the only person or you and Isaac be the only people that, can help move them this direction towards us maybe isn't the best. It's potential that
yeah,
someone else could say, go talk to Isaac because it sounds like it
yeah.
might be a good fit, or go talk to Rita. Or you're loaning money to someone, you say, okay, let's get you next step over to Isaac.
You said realtors, I was sitting there thinking the same thing, our commercial brokers.
Yeah,
All know
Yeah.
that because it's.
exactly.
You can't get 6.5% today, so that's something that would help them with their.
Big deal.
So-
Yeah.
I think clarifying too, as far as intake, how that intake happens, when you get that, when Rita gets that information, a heads up, I think that would be important too. To define at what point do you and Rita, get that information? Is it directly after a contact occurs and said, do we say, talk to Isaac, talk to Rita? Making sure that everyone on the board knows
So, yeah.
at that point, how that's gonna occur, so we don't.
Usually, Foods Alive and then the ones prior to that, from the point of getting the application to formal presentation, I can't recall a deal being longer than 2 months. And that was tabling the C&K tool. Restructure, essentially what we call it. So it's been about 2 months.
Are you asking like, do they talk to Retha and Isaac before they fill an application out? Or
Yes.
after, like,
That,
Yeah.
so the,
because they might talk to one of us and say, hey, I heard you're on the
Yeah.
board and I saw you in the meeting. You know, tell
right,
me a little bit about that. At that point, is it at that point that we say, no, you need to really talk to Isaac or Retha? You know,
Since, I mean, I don't want to be the gatekeeper
Right.
of all the projects, right? Which is why I've said the application's online. You could have them start. And this is a great exercise for them in the first place. If they can't fill out a box in the application, we shouldn't be talking about it yet. That's kind of what that mechanism is used for. You can fill it out entirely, then let's talk. We might still have questions, but at least you got the basis of a decision. Banks handle it the same way. If they're missing documentation, they won't proceed with a bank note. So I would say application checklist is online. They can start.
You can pass that
As soon
down.
as they submit that to me, I turn around with the credit check pretty darn quick because I know that's what you're gonna ask me.
and if they have questions concerning filling out the applications, which is one of those things that,
I would be welcome for any of you to answer. If you're not comfortable, I can.
Because that
If
was-
it's legal, I'm gonna turn to Kim.
that was one of the big things that I encountered with the AFO loan is
Yeah.
handholding.
Yep.
Would it make sense for us to walk through the process, like a coming meeting, and walk through the whole process of what it would take for us go through it on our own, either one, but, and how we want to sell it, you know, in the end as well.
What would be your experience
Yeah.
having going through this process?
Yeah, exactly. So just, so we could all walk through and say, hey, this is how we want to present it to the person that wants the loan in the first place. That might be worth our time. Might take 10 minutes or so, but that'd
right.
be good.
Yeah.
And we couldn't all along been asking the applicants and the people who did or didn't get it, their feedback.
Yeah.
So we just haven't
There's no
done
reason that you
so.
guys can't, we'll get these redone. I think it's got Isaac's number and Kathy Armstrong still. But that's a lot of info to read. Like if we can just do some bullet points and maybe this is another meeting that you guys redesign, we can get these printed up or we talk about it. But once it's been determined for sure, there's no reason why you guys can't keep a stack of these and be like, hey, you're talking about opening a business? Look at this, here's some help, there's.
From a marketing standpoint too, we could use people like Foods Alive, maybe put together a video for the website, you know,
Yeah.
what they went through in the process. And
Or a quote on here like Maria said, hey,
if nothing
not
else,
as much red tape as I thought, or whatever, I don't
welcome
know.
other businesses to the community. It'd be great to
Right.
do it that way.
Do we know anybody with a camera?
Yep, I have one. I have a podcast around
An
here.
iPhone 5.
It's funny, when we went through that Okra thing, you said people ought to be able to fill out, and you're exactly right, they ought to be easy. But I actually filled out, I think, 3 online applications for 3 different people.
Mhm.
And these are people that own businesses and are very, very smart, and it's just,
It was just a lot of info.
I just don't think they even knew where to get started.
They probably weren't young.
No, these are people like the hatchery and people like that needed the help and
Yeah.
appreciated it, and
I will say though, our current checklist revised in 2017. Corporations, I still run across that cannot provide me 3 years of financial projection.
Well,
You laugh.
I just, I live it. Trust me, I live it every day.
It's not a joke that when you go through this process, you might get those people like, well, it's not worth it for $100,000. Well, that's kind of the point, right? It is worth it, but we're just not giving money to anybody. We owe it to council to say, hey, this is a good investment.
For the citizens, yeah,
So we have to meet almost a different standard,
true.
a higher standard maybe.
Would it be helpful using the podcast room over at the EDC to have an instructional video on, hey, this is what you're going to encounter with your application. These are the things that will need to.
I can talk about it, but I'm not the Vanna White you want on screen.
We can say, call Maria and she'll
I
help you.
don't know.
She did so good with all the other ones.
Vanna was, you don't need to be Vanna.
No.
I think they just want the information on how to fill it out.
Yes,
The reassurance that, am I filling this out right, is big. I mean, one of the biggest things that I find is that just being able to take that baby step of like hitting enter. It's like a huge thing for people. Yeah, honestly, it's huge.
So when the intake was only me, or even city council, Kathy dealt with this too. Applicants of the original form and the grant program had an issue with giving me or Kathy their social security number. And I understand why, right? Even with an NDA. So that's why we went to the online credit check with Experian, because I send them an email through Experian. I never get their social security number. I don't want it. I need their credit report.
That's what you.
So we ran into barriers, which is what changed us a little bit, because we would sometimes have them provide it for us, and then you have an issue of these numbers manipulated after the fact. So
having that third party verification was really important.
and I think it costs the applicant like $50, but if you're serious about it,
One of the things I think that would help, you mentioned it, is if you got the bankers in the city to kind of piggyback, your job would be easy because then if we had $1 million loan we were doing for somebody,
you're going to have some of that information.
we can send it all to you. If we get them to sign a borrower's authorization
Right.
saying it's okay, we can send you the credit, we can send you everything.
That's true.
And then you just get your $100,000 loan docs ready and
I see this in blocks though. This is in blocks, like, we've got to get this done,
Right.
the ordinance updated, fully define the program, really hone in on how we reach people and market this. And then to your point, Sandy, we all need to be on the same page and understanding how this process works. And we're probably going to learn something and make some changes to things. If we try to do it ourselves, we're going to find problems, things that are a struggle, that are irritations.
Yeah, and I think knowing exactly really the reason, like you were talking about, why we want that piece of information rather than like the social security, did you really need that? What you really wanted was a credit to understand their credit score and do they have the ability to pay that back? That's what you really wanted to know. So going through all those questions and finding out what's the root thing that you want to get out of that.
Agreed.
Rather than, putting them through this rigorous paper, paper trail of let me look back at all my financials and how that goes.
So I think the amendment of the ordinance itself won't be such a big deal. I think it's you guys determining, maybe looking through this and whatever you guys come up with on this, Kim and I can help get the ordinance amended, and that's to match this and make sure that's good. So that's not, Jerry will present it to council and we can work on that. So once you guys determine your next steps for your rules and procedures that you vote on and decide to send on to council we'll do the amended ordinance and Jerry will take them both at the same time.
Okay. Are there any issues with going along as we are today without the amended ordinance? If I go back to that item, only because the reason why I asked that is because of the quantification in the ordinance of the seats. And that it's not matched up with
quantification of what?
the seats and the way that they're put into the ordinance today. There's a seat,
The board members.
membership for this group. Like having one from Elevate Venture is still listed in the ordinance. That was one of the key points that we wanted to update because we're not meeting that today.
Yeah.
Are we okay if we're not meeting it today with the intention that we will in the future with the updated ordinance?
I wouldn't worry too much about it going forward, since you don't have a long line of applicants, but that is a very important thing to correct.
So getting that updated, and I mean, I think That's in the rules and procedures, or it's in the actual
It's in the
ordinance?
ordinance. The ordinance states that we can have a max of 5, a minimum of,
Yes.
or a max of 7, a
We just
minimum
talked
of
about that
5.
today.
And 1 seat comes from Elevate
Elevate.
Ventures, which is not the case.
Okay. So I think you guys are operating under the state code as well right now, which technically kind of trumps the ordinance, and the membership is spelled out in that code.
Well, that's an enabling ordinance, so or the enabling statute, so the ordinance has to follow
It has to
that,
follow that. Okay.
should follow that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't, if Kim's okay with if you would get applications or continuing to move forward, and as long as you guys are working toward that amendment and that change.
Okay.
The nice thing
Like he
about
said, I
it
think
is Elevate Ventures is not the same entity it was in 2013 that it is today. So they don't operate that way. Therefore, they wouldn't even have somebody to appoint to this body.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, we need to get them off of the ordinance clearly as quickly as practicable, but not urgently.
There you go. As practical as you said. There you go. I like that. Okay, so moving forward to summarize the conversation here, so we know what we're going to work on. We've defined the ETJ as not a component of what can be included in this, so that needs to be stricken from the language of the policy and procedure. And I don't think there's anything in the ordinance, right, related to that.
No ordinance specifies it. It can't be ETJs.
Okay, so then, working beyond that, we're gonna, Isaac, you're gonna take a shot at removing that language. It sounds like you're also going to work with, we're gonna work on adding the loan and grant program details of what we've previously done into the policy and procedure as well.
The entrepreneur loan and grant program,
Yes.
yes, because we've got that 1-page micro grant program thing that Kathy.
And you have the details on that.
Details. So I'll try to mirror it to this. And then I asked for assistance from Mark and Maria or anybody else who wants to
On the
kind of craft the
commercial.
language about the commercial retail.
Okay,
I'll give you a rundown of the procedures that I took in on the back end for that loan.
Yeah. So you got really 3 items in that. One, it's structurally define the eligibility. 2, based on if they're eligible, conceptually what those loan terms would be like. And then 3, the loan repayment,
mhm,
because the first 2 programs are dependent upon what that final balance is. If it's 100,000, we know what those are because it's been pretty well listed out. If it's a fifth of that or a fourth of that, are we just modifying everything down, or is it something different? I don't know. So you really have kind of like 3 areas in that document that if you're working on commercial and retail, facility,
Range.
terms, repayment.
yeah.
Let's see your range.
And then in the meantime, Retha, if you and I can work together on the creation of maybe a binder for each member of this group so that they're up to date. And I probably have one that Kathy did for me back in 2015 or 14, whenever I started with this group.
Yeah, I looked
remember
through
what that
the
was.
box of stuff that I had. I don't know if there's anything in this, but I can look through to see if there's something in there as well. But yeah, I'll put something if you get me
I'll
the
work
correct
with you.
documents. Yeah,
We can meet.
definitely.
And then the binders. And then I do like your idea potentially of maybe walking through the process of having a small group walk. Yeah, I really like that idea of living it for a little bit.
I'm the co-chair.
Clearly. Well, that's what it
You
looks
are
too,
looking
right?
up to the spot.
All right, anything else as it relates to policy and procedure? I know we've kind of been, around the agenda here. Anything else on that? We spoke last time. I'll move on to the Who's Alive and having them come back on site to give us a presentation about where they're at from a business perspective.
Coordinating details of eligibility. Obviously, they weren't able to make this round work, so I'll just need to know formally what our dates are for the rest of the year. And see if I can get them penciled in.
So we've met the last 2 weeks or 2 months, correct? So this is month 2, so it would be October sometime. October 21st is the next meeting. All that is possible. And November the 18th. Those are the final two scheduled meetings of this group.
Let's see if either one of those two dates work. No.
Sorry, Andy, did you say October and November?
October and November, yes. October the 21st and November the 18th. Does that sound correct? Yep. Okay. All right, so work on Foods Alive. Anything else in old business? Move on to new business. Any new applications?
We had two BRNE visits, both BRNE visits in the city of Angola. Both were doing expansion of equipment. Information was provided about AIF. So it's being considered. I've been told no, I haven't been told yet, so I would say it's being considered. And then I did have, as I spoke earlier, I did have that conversation about a business buying another local business who's already been in operations inside the city limits. Not for the transaction of purchasing the business, but for operational concerns after the business has been purchased. So succession is often what I called it. At that point, I would consider them eligible, but I wanted to get a feel tonight from you all. Does that make sense? Do you want to stay away from that? One could argue, Mark could probably argue, you know, what's the longevity of that kind of business because the history started the day when they take ownership. Financial histories, that is, but you could maybe draw upon some previous business dealings, depending on how it's capitalized. So right now I'm full steam ahead as if they would be eligible, but it's going to require more documentation. So I did send them an application. I received anything back.
I'll work on this a little bit too. Maybe, we should probably have this approved before we send it out amongst the board, or
From a marketing perspective?
look over before we
Sure.
hand it out, make it available.
Sure.
Okay. All right.
Did everybody get one if you guys want to submit your request to Jerry?
Sure. I've got a half box left back.
You're welcome. I haven't graded term papers in a long time, so.
Who printed these, Isaac? Do you know where these came from even? Okay.
It's been a while.
They were printed before my time.
I have your name on them,
It
but
must have-
probably somebody, yeah,
I was not involved in the creative.
of this,
No got
yeah.
approval.
I'll ask, Kay.
Maybe, I would say maybe Kathy did it.
I was just gonna say yeah, because it has your name and Kathy's, so it probably,
Maybe Kathy did it. I can look on the box. Box got a name on it.
yeah, and if you have the application on your website too, it should say, it doesn't say that on here. So I mean, there's definitely some things could get,
I just checked that and for whatever reason, it's not showing up. So I have some work to do tonight, but the application along with its program criteria have been in the past.
I'll check our website as well.
I think having printed ones and PDFs uploaded to the website so that people could download them from there.
Print them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Print them themselves. Be a good idea.
Any additional new business?
I don't know if it's old or new. Last time we had asked about financial statements. I know Ryan was on vacation.
Oh, yes. And I talked to him a little bit about this meeting. Yeah, I'll make something know.
Well, I don't know if we want them out in email. We don't want it to go out in email.
We did in the past, prior to the meeting. At least a couple times I recall getting emails a lot. It doesn't have to be. I just think it's good for us to know what the balance is of the account
Right.
and then where the individual notes are at.
If we're not meeting until the end of October, is it okay to not have that information until the end of October? Are we okay with that? If not, the other option would be either another meeting or
No,
sending it out to,
I'm fine with that, assuming no debt is passed. Right? I mean, there's,
past the due date or
Past
missed
the due
payment date.
I'm assuming since we've not been notified that they've always been paid.
In the past, did Ryan come and present those financial reports or you guys just have them?
We have them.
Okay,
Previous to Ryan, when Deb Twitchell was here, she would, on occasion, I recall her presenting
She would
them.
present sometimes, yeah.
I don't know if that was her preference.
okay, I'll check with
I just
Ryan,
want to
yeah.
see,
Mhm.
just have it in front of you. Yeah, no, I think it's very good and I'm
The
sorry.
total fund and the, like, the individualized version.
Didn't he present that to us 2 or 3 meetings ago, Ryan? He might not have been here, but didn't he?
He might have.
I wasn't here, I must have been.
I saw a version of it, but it wasn't itemized out. You saw where loans were, but it didn't show
Oh.
payments nor what their balance was.
So you want to see the actual report?
I think it's healthy for our board to see that.
We need to see the total fund as well as the total account, the entire fund plus the individualized. Only Foods Alive is outstanding at this point in time, correct?
I'm gonna change the word outstanding to only active.
Only active, there you go.
I don't want to.
Outstanding. They're outstanding, well, they are
They're
outstanding, but
behind
that's
in
okay.
payments.
Good point.
But they're still outstanding.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so if there's not an issue as far as the payment of that goes, then we can wait until our October meeting to receive that information.
Okay.
Any other new business, any other business? We've already talked about reports. Anything else for the good of the order before we adjourn? Thank you for your work today. Appreciate your attendance, participation. Isaac, thank you for your work outside.
Yes.
All right, motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Co-chair motions to adjourn. A second. Sandy, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. All right, motion has passed to adjourn at
Hey, Kyle,
5:06.
will you hit end stream on that?
See you tomorrow.
Where's it at?
Thanks.
Very good.
I got it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you get to it? Thank you.